some countries reopen their borders to international travel, airlines are implementing measures to reduce the risk of infection for passengers. A simple cough can project droplets of different sizes into the air. Gravity will force large droplets to the ground, but the smaller ones could stay suspended for a long time.
A study of a commercial flight in 1979 helps us understand how viruses can spread in confined spaces like planes. 54 passengers were on board and delayed for 3 hours before takeoff. At this time, the ventilation systems were not functioning. 72 hours after the flight, 72% of the aircraft passengers became infected with influenza, all from one infected passenger who had boarded the flight. Ventilation systems on most commercial airlines are specifically designed to circulate air. Air in the cabin is refreshed every 4 minutes through HEPA, or high-efficiency particulate air filters. Cabin air is blasted through a 3D mesh of microglass fibers to capture microscopic particles and deadly germs. The SARS-CoV-2 virus is microscopic, measuring approximately 125 nanometers in diameter, which is similar to other viruses like influenza. It's smaller than bacteria, which range widely in size, but start from around 1,000 nanometers and a fraction of the size of a red blood cell of a human hair. The gaps in the HEPA filter are large enough for a virus particle to pass through, but they're still caught by Brownian motion. Smaller gas particles are shot through the filter. These knock the virus particles around in a zigzag-like fashion, increasing the probability of collision with one of the mesh fibers, where it's then deposited. HEPA filters on board modern aircraft remove 99.995% of all virus particles, and the air is recycled through the cabin 20 to 30 times every hour. Regular maintenance and replacement of the filters is required to maintain that level of efficiency. However, even though the filters are nearly 100% efficient, within those 4 minutes, air has usually mixed across 3 to 4 rows in front and behind. Professor Chin-Yan Chen and his team have modelled different scenarios within air cabins to study how particles can circulate.
So you can see that the cough or talk, the droplet is go up to the ceiling level, then the ventilation system brings it down along the walls of the window and to the floor level, and then it could really go to the other side of the aisle, and then finally form this mixing condition.
Another well-studied flight on March 15, 2003, a Boeing 737 carrying 120 people flew for 3 hours to Beijing from Hong Kong, where a 72-year-old man with SARS had boarded the plane. The World Health Organization could only make contact with 65 people 8 days after the flight, but of those, 22 were found to have been infected with SARS. The majority of those were located close to the 72-year-old man, indicating localized infection. However, infected passengers were identified throughout the cabin, and it's believed they had no contact with the infected person, either before or after the flight. This has perplexed epidemiologists.
So in these journeys, this person infected more than 20 fellow passengers in the airplane, and then 4 of them died as a result, which means the seat next to this sick passenger is a very high-risk seat. But you also see from this seat map, passengers sit as far as 7 seats could get infected. So we also suspect that the wake caused by a walking passenger or a walking flight attendant could bring these particles very far.
The challenge facing scientists in the aviation industry is understanding exactly how SARS-CoV-2 is transmitted from an infected person to another person, which is more complicated than you might think. We know that SARS-CoV-2 is primarily excreted through respiratory droplets which leave the mouth and nose. According to the World Health Organization, these droplets are relatively heavy, do not travel far, and quickly sink to the ground. These droplets can land on objects and surfaces around the person, such as tables, doorknobs, and handrails. People can become infected by touching these objects or surfaces and then touching their eyes, nose, or mouth. This indicates that the likeliest spread of the virus is from touching contaminated surfaces where the virus can remain viable for several hours and sometimes days. For these reasons, airports and air cabins are being deep cleaned and in some cases radiated with UV light to kill the virus. Strict hand washing regimes are also being promoted to prevent transmission. But this doesn't give the full picture. A recent hospital study in Singapore looked at SARS-CoV-2 viral particles in samples taken from the air surrounding COVID patients. They found that virus particles were present in droplet sizes ranging from 1,000 to 4,000 nanometers, despite the hospital rooms having the air changed 12 times an hour. Droplets of this size can hang in the air for up to 3 hours, but limitations of the study meant they couldn't conclude whether these aerosol droplets were a possible route of transmission. However, one of the first animal studies of SARS-CoV-2 in golden Syrian hamsters has found that aerosol droplets was in fact a successful route for transmission. This controlled study is problematic for governments and industry wishing to reduce the 2-meter social distancing rule. If virus particles can hang in the air for up to 3 hours and continue to be infectious, then people need distancing and shielding to protect themselves. Ventilation systems must also not move infected air around. Professor Qingyang Chen and his team have designed a new ventilation system that doesn't mix the clean air in the cabin. Rather than from above, it's supplied from below, directly to your breathing zone. Then when you breathe out, the contaminated air rises and is extracted at ceiling level.
So as a result, you are not sharing the air with your neighboring passenger. With our new design, we anticipate that we could reduce the risk of infection by about 50%. It's something I hope that the airplane manufacturers are willing to implement.
So when we're back on planes, how will things be different?
As you can see, most of US major airliners are asking passengers to put masks on. And some of them also leave the middle seats open. And I think this is a very important first step for the airliners to take those measures to mitigate the risk. I have to say that nothing is bulletproof. When you travel, you always have a risk. And risk is not only occurs in the air cabin. It could occur in the terminals, could occur in the buses or the subways. We hope that the airliners will take proper measures as I have described here. And this will be very important for building the confidence on the passengers.
And one airline chief executive has told CGTN that in the future, if a vaccine is developed, we may need to carry health certificates before we board planes. That's it for this COVID-19 special. Look after yourself and each other, and we'll see you again next week.